example, you should be asking the ones that got it right, because you'll have those few students that, by luck, got it right. And I mean, the next problem, they're gonna apply that same process, and I'm like, they're gonna get a wrong answer, or it's not be what they expected. Well, if I didn't catch it before, and they weren't able to explain it to me correctly, I'm like, okay, well, let's go back, let's rethink this, because when you go on, it's gonna be confusing, and I'm gonna miss that misconception. Someone got something right.
It's that art of teaching. It's knowing your students and monitoring them and checking for understanding constantly, being very vigilant and paying attention. But that's assuming that you're very careful about crafting that lesson up front, that there's not going to be so many of those. And so the idea of that I require my students to build a PowerPoint, which Tyler is going to be with one of you guys, I don't know who, but anyway, with one of you guys at Lockhart, that he is going to be required to build a lesson and do that kind of research to build his lessons, because we're going to give him time to do that, you know, a lot more than you guys have. But he's going to have to, you know, pay that close attention. And again, as he's teaching the lesson, he's listening for where there are problems. What is it in the lesson that created that problem? If we go out and we're observing a lesson and we see kids not understanding, you know what we do? We go back to best practices. We're going back to the 3 lesson planning principles, or we're going back to questioning strategy. I mean, it's always a violation of some best practice when kids don't understand. We have not done something that we needed to do in most cases. I'll put it that way. Okay, so that was one of the things that we wanted to look at. So in this case, we said we need the instructions to be very clear. Anytime you have to elaborate on an instruction that should be up there, that means it was not written clearly to begin with. The question was not crafted clearly.
Do you guys ever, how to, when you give a student an assignment, make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? So whenever I have instructions on my board, I know I have that prior knowledge, but I go step by step, and if I can't do something, that means I'm missing something or something's not clear.
Okay, what she's talking about is an activity we've done probably 50 years or so. It has to do with actually science fair and teaching kids how to conduct an investigation about the methods. So you get a loaf of bread, and you get a jar of peanut butter and a jar of jelly, and you ask the kids, okay, tell me how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And they'll say, well, put the peanut butter on the bread. So you open the peanut butter and you take it out with your hand and you start wiping it on the outside of the bread.
Exactly.
And so that shows about that clarity of instructions, etc. It's quite clever. It works well with kids.
Oh,
Yes.
just as a caveat to that, our schools, or food, if you want to use peanut butter, but obviously the peanut allergies, they've gone to using something called sun butter, which is really, really tasty. And it's butter, it's like peanut butter but made with sunflower seeds. And it's really good, you can get it at HEB. I've always wanted to-
Okay, I want you to look at the second bullet here. So, again, you want to make it simple. I want to go back to what Ashley said about drawings, diagrams, pictures, you know, whatever, to make sure that that's clear. So it might be on that second bullet that you would say, observe, whatever it says, what happens
What happened?
in the bottle.
The
Was it- what else does it
And
say?
the balloon,
Okay, and the balloon.
record your observations.
But that's another one. And now it's record. Okay, can you see how much more simple that is in putting all that same information in a sentence? Okay, so it's these kind of things that you wanna pay attention to the best practices. In your handouts yesterday, I gave you, I forgot what it's called, it's a questioning one, you know, about how different ways to ask questions. So when you're planning your lessons, go back to those resources in here. Oh, it says assessment strategies. Go back to the resources that you have to see how is it that I can make this lesson so rich that a student is gonna have a hard time not learning this. The last thing that I want to point out that I did is you'll notice I've circled the word assembly. Why do you think I circled the word assembly? What's an assembly? Is that when we go to the cafeteria or something? Okay, what could you replace this with? Oh, apparatus, well, that's a good one, apparatus for assembly? What is this?
The bottle and the balloon.
This is the bottom with the balloon attached to it, so something, if you're gonna call this an assembly, then do it up here so it's defined, don't just stick it in, yeah.
And I learned last year that a lot of times kids knew the words once they were said, once they heard it, but just reading it, they didn't know the word. So I think reading the bullets through just so that they recognize the vocabulary.
Oh, okay, I had misled you then, cause I didn't mean that the students just read it.
Okay.
I mean that as, oh, I'll put them up. I meant that as the, that before students ever touch any materials, I'm going to review this, and I'm gonna be pointing to this. So you're going to lift the balloon, and you know how Jen held it up? Okay, so I'm almost gonna be doing a demo going through this before students ever touch the materials. So, I'm sorry if I misled you with that. Other questions? Other suggestions that you can think of, yeah?
So again, since it's supposed to be an explore, like when we got to the, observing the bottle, could you have like put questions maybe in there, like what happened to the alka-seltzer?
Guiding
Because what if
questions.
kids are only maybe
Okay, the
focusing on-
general answer is yes. I don't know that particular question I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but yes, in general, you,
Okay.
yeah. So we call that guided discovery, and you definitely want to start out kids, especially at the beginning of the year, with guided discovery, very lockstep almost.
Well, to make sure that they don't just look at, oh, the balloons,
Yes,
but they're not
You're
recognizing
cueing
what's
them with
happening.
those questions,
Right.
yes.
So make sure they
absolutely.
are looking for what you want them to look at.
Absolutely. And then notice that last bullet actually has two questions in there. What has happened to the weight of the apparatus? That's one question. Then there's another question in the same bullet. So those two, I would recommend that they be separated. Now, here's the other thing that I recommend with my students. I don't know if anyone want to jump in here. Any of mine want to jump in? Patricia's thinking. What did she say? What did she say? I don't know that this necessarily happens here, but generally, if you've got a question, you need an answer in writing. Helps, Because a lot of times there's a lot of discussion or dancing around it, and the student never gets the answer, the final answer. Now, it shouldn't come before there's lots of discussion and student input, but at some point, there's gotta be the answer in there for the student, both in writing and not just verbally. All right, so do you have any other questions about best practices that we wanna go back and think about? I just wanna do one other thing with the framework, and I thought I had it here, excuse me, let me go back here and get it. Okay, so the last thing, and Laura actually is really in it when I put her. No. All right, so, let me do this one first. All right, so we have from Browning, she said she uses this with her students.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. The asking, it. This says telling, and guess, can you see what that is? Is that a smile or a frown? That's a frown. So the idea is that,
The light's not on the,
Like the light.
oh, see it better this way?
But the light on.
Okay.
Under the light, it should work.
Okay. Uh-oh, it's frozen.
You froze it.
All right, so you have a telling and you have an asking. So the idea is that when the teacher is telling too much, that's not a good idea. When they're asking students questions, that's a better idea. So thus the green and red that Ruby and Alexis came up with. Go ahead. Okay, the last thing that I want to show you or remind you of, or wait a minute, it's frozen. How do we do this here? Take it off. Okay, there we go. All right, so this is the NGSS. This is that summary document that is so dense. I mean, it just is, got jam-packed full of information in it. But this is a kind of a summary. So Sandy McLemore was tasked with trying to figure out how can we lay that groundwork for that hole that's in the TEKS about the particle nature of matter. Now, here's the irony, and I haven't come to grips with this. If you look at the table of contents, it's only at grade 2 and grade 5. It does not scaffold it in the standards. In these standards. That's the only standards I'm talking about. The TEKS I'm not calling standards, I'm calling those TEKS. So in our national standards, it's only grade 2 and 5. But what? Don't ask me why.
No, but I was just gonna say in the NSES, it's K4 or 5A.
Right, because they're different grade spans in the framework, the framework for K-12 science education. It has it by grade level in elementary. The problem that we have in middle school is that it's, by end of grade 8 and by end of grade 12, so we gotta figure out what's in between there. So what I was going to say is that if I were you, K-5, 5th grade teachers, I'd go back and look at your instruction at the lower grade levels for this particle nature of matter and see if you can identify where that is in the TEKS and might have some conversations with your other grade level. So I said Sandy decided to do these in stations. I think that was probably a good idea for teaching teachers. It's not a good idea for kids because it's too many concepts, more than one concept per lesson. Might be a good review, but not an initial instruction. These need to each be a full lesson. Then in grade 5, which is where Jen jumped in, there were these 4 standards. This way. Okay, these 4 standards. And notice that, number 1, develop a model to describe that matter is made of particles too small to be seen.
That was the evaluation.
Yeah, that was and that's what these are. That's mostly what the NGSS are, just evaluations. By the end of grade 8, the student should be able to develop a model to describe matter as made of particles too small to be seen.
That's actually by the end of grade 5.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, by the end of grade 5. So you may see the kind of physics background with this, but look what happens when you get to 4. That's a grade 6 TEKS on evidence of a chemical reaction, which is,
So I had to really learn, because I don't teach that. I had to really learn chemical reactions and what evidence of a chemical reaction was.
but what you should be teaching in the TEKS in K-5 is direct and indirect evidences. Observations are direct evidence, and indirect evidence would include inferences that you would make based on observations. So when Laura comes in on Monday, she is going to jump in at grade 8 with this. And the idea that we wanted you to see how this builds and how you can take what's in these standards to help you use in your own lesson planning.
Or deepen your own content area knowledge.
Yeah.
'Cause I won't ever, well, okay, next year, according to my teachers, I won't teach chemical reactions. I won't teach this.
No, you're not teaching chemical reaction, you're teaching evidence,
Evidence of chemical.
indirect evidence that a chemical reaction has occurred. No, you will not.
Based on new teeth?
No, next year's teach, I'm just saying.
It's not in the, it's not in the
I
street.
don't know what's gonna happen in the future, whatever, but.
Either this year or next year,
I'm not
will-
going
it,
to teach that.
it will not, it does not have to be taught at grade 5. Okay? So you have the rest of the day for your planning? Yes?
So I have questions
Mm-hmm.
about blending. Like, I'm still having a hard time seeing the national standards and where my teaks line up. We're not supposed to march through the teaks. Like, I see a puzzle, the picture is getting clearer,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not there yet. So, because I'm not there yet, I looked at Jen's lesson going, she's teaching my teaks, she's teaching my teaks.
Right, but you're supposed to be learning that, not thinking about a teacher, so, and you're thinking about she's teaching my teaks, but,
So in my head, I'm thinking, she's not staying in her lane, she's in my lane. And I'm
Exactly.
like, beep, beep, get out of my lane.
so in Texas, that would be true, yes.
So how do we marry these things together so we're all doing?
I have an answer, but I wanna hear yours. I have an idea.
Because
I know, I understand exactly what you're talking about. Now, I wanna hear some other people's ideas about how you can use these national standards to improve your teaching of the TEKS. That's how I'm taking your question. Yes, ma'am?
Well, and it's something that needs to happen through administration, but, there needs to be vertical alignment conversations. I mean, we can look at it deeply, we can sit here and look at a lot of papers and a lot
What
of,
does that mean, vertical alignment?
from kindergarten all the way up.
I know, what does that mean with her specific question?
So, say this was a real life scenario, real world example connection. Even from the elementary 5th grade level to the middle school, there needs to be conversation, face to face or email or whatever, Skype. But the teachers have to be talking to each other from the bottom or top to bottom. So that there's this continuing thread of,
So, you're talking about staying in the lane,
yes,
that idea, okay? Somebody else have
Right.
another idea?
so
Melissa,
they
your
can
hand up, you
merge
just
into
raised your-
traffic as they go on.
It's thinking about.
I'm
being-
sorry, Jen had hers up first. Jen, you
Well-
wanna continue?
I agree that the standards can help us look at what we have, like what we need to teach with the teams. But I learned a lot about what kids need to understand about this at my level by reading those standards. And the NGSS I find especially helpful because they have those clarifying statements that the stop here. Don't go any further than this.
Your framework has those too.
Right, but the NGSS and the framework are almost word for word, because the NGSS are built on the framework. But reading that and reading it in depth even the NCTM standards, when we read them before we started planning our lessons, I was like, oh, I never thought of that. Cause I've read them before, but we forget. So when I go back and read them, I think about, oh, that piece is a part of this concept that I never thought about that. How can I put that into my lesson, or do I even need to? Is it just helpful information for me to know, or is this something that I really need to be thinking about that my kids need to get from me? And I find the standards to be helpful most in that area.
I don't think that answered Kim's question though, did it?
So,
Just
What-
yes or no,
so-
because we got somebody else gonna jump in here.
go and then
Okay,
go,
go ahead, Melissa,
Melissa.
or were you just yawning?
No, I'm just thinking if I actually wanna ask my question or not, but. No, I don't want to.
Anybody
So-
else wanna jump in? Candace?
I think too, to build on your discussion of vertical alignment, if there were those vertical alignment opportunities, building some common experiences, so if you had taken this investigation with the balloon, and then in 6th grade, that was investigated again and built, and the knowledge was built upon, I think could be, powerful, because those experiences are coming back to kids.
So you're
instead of-
saying do the activity but don't teach the science, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that you take the activity or the investigation that Jennifer did and